Welcome to the Knowledge Seeker channel. The channel is dedicated to exploring critical issues in the world. This presentation is titled, "Is Dangote Refinery a subsidiary of an American company?" This is a section of Dangote's refinery in Lekki, Lagos, Nigeria. This is also a subsection of the same refinery, one of the largest and most modern in the world. This is Mallam Aliko Dangote, the owner or the major shareholder of the Dangote Oil Refining Company. Now, who owns Dangote Oil Refining Company? Is Mallam Aliko Dangote or the International Investment Business Development Group that owns it? The situation is very confusing. When most Nigerians talk about the Dangote Oil Refining Company, that is the DORC, they seem to assume that the company is wholly owned by Mallam Aliko Dangote and a few others. It is based on this assumption Nigerians think that the refinery will assist in reducing the high cost of fuel in Nigeria. They rationalize that if an indigenous petroleum company operates at full capacity in refining petroleum and other related products, the fuel situation will be stabilized since there will be no need to import refined oil from overseas. They also assume that with a major indigenous oil refining company such as the Dangote Oil Refining Company, that is the DORC, Nigeria would begin to depend on its private sector to drive the engine of economic and industrial development. The reason is that the DORC has a capacity to refine or process about 650,000 barrels of crude oil per day. This makes the $19 billion refinery one of the largest and most modern in the world. This is another section of the same Dangote refinery. Now, let's look at the politics of oil pricing in Nigeria. While many Nigerians jubilated and hoped that the Dangote Oil Refinery Company will contribute drastically in reducing the price of PMS when it began operations around early September 2024, they were dumbfounded by the actions of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited and other government officials who were not enthusiastic about the refinery. It got to a point where Mallam Aliko Dangote even suggested that the Nigerian government should buy the refinery from him. Then a tussle developed as various stakeholders competed to set the price of petroleum in Nigeria. At one point, the Dangote refinery was compelled to sell PMS at a higher price compared to those being imported from overseas. At another point, the Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria insisted that the members will continue to import refined petroleum since the price of Dangote oil was too high. Then, in October, the NNPCL set the price around 1,000 to 1,200 naira per liter. While Nigerians expect the oil price to come down, some stakeholders kept insisting that the oil price in Nigeria must be equalized with the dollar. In other words, there are some members of the oil industry who want the price of petroleum in Nigeria to be matched with the dollar value as it is in the US. This demand is unusual because all members of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, that is OPEC, do not pair the price of locally refined oil with the American dollar. Yet, some Nigerians want the matching. This increases the price of PMS. It is the desire to sell refined oil in Nigeria based on the dollar value that is driving up the price of PMS, despite that the Dangote Refinery has started to refine oil and other products in the country. Thus, instead of the oil price going down, it is actually increasing, meaning that Nigerians will continue to pay steeply. While oil pricing in Nigeria becomes an instrument of abracadabra, like magic, in which no one knows what the actual price of oil will be the next day. Now, let's look at the battle to monopolize oil production in Nigeria. Apart from the issue pertaining to fixing the price of gasoline, it seems that there is a power struggle between the Dangote Oil Refining Company and the NNPCL and the marketers who import PMS from overseas. It seems that the DORC or Dangote Refinery wants to monopolize the production of refined petroleum products. Hence, insists that no fuel should be imported from abroad. If the DORC demands succeed, the Dangote Refinery will be the only company that will produce refined petroleum in Nigeria. This will lead to a monopoly by the Dangote Group. It should be recalled that Farouk Ahmed, the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, had warned that the Dangote Oil Refining Company was seeking to monopolize the refining and supply of refined petroleum in Nigeria in July 2024. In fact, the Dangote Group went to court to seek a ruling barring the importation of refined petroleum products into Nigeria. In a suit filed at the Federal High Court in Abuja, the company, and I quote, asked the Federal High Court in Abuja to void import licenses issued to the Nigerian Petroleum Corporation Limited, Matrix Petroleum Services Limited, AA Rano Limited, and 4 other companies for the purpose of importing refined petroleum products that are already being produced by the Dangote without shortfalls, and I quote. Then suddenly it was announced on the media that the Dangote Group had settled the issue with the NNPCL out of court. The question is whether the Dangote Group is taking this action as a patriotic duty to help Nigeria stop importing refined petroleum, or the group is interested in monopolizing the oil sector so that it can be the sole determinant of petroleum refining and pricing nationally. People wonder about the Dangote action because some Nigerians noted that he was the sole importer and marketer of cement in Nigeria for a long time. This is the symbol of the IIB Development Group. The IIB stands for International Investment Business. This is again one of the high-end business buildings in the United States. So the question again is the Dangote Oil Refining Company owned by IIB or Dangote? The answer might be shocking to many Nigerians. A major reason why oil price is not likely to go down is because, quite contrary to the public perception that Dangote and his group owns the Dangote Oil Refining Company, it appears that 70% of the company is owned by the International Investment Business Development Group based in Washington D.C, USA. Thus, the Dangote Oil Refining Company seems to be a subsidiary of the IIB. Perhaps since the IIB is a major stakeholder in the Dangote Oil Refining Company, no wonder the price of petroleum is being measured in dollar terms rather than in naira, even though the refinery is based in Nigeria. In other words, the American company may probably want to recoup its investment in the refinery, hence the insistence on the price being set above the naira value. Perhaps due probably to the American stakeholders' influence on pricing, some Nigerian marketers insist that they will continue to import refined oil from overseas. They reason that the price of an imported refined PMS would be cheaper than the price being set by the Dangote Refinery Company. The way things stand, it appears that Mr. Dangote is not at liberty to reduce the price of PMS in Nigeria because the company is most probably a subsidiary of the International Investment Business Development Group based in the USA. The DORC or the Dangote Refinery was acquired on July 15, 2023. It is valued at $19 billion, and you can go online and check for yourself. Indeed, it is clearly stated on the IIB website that the Dangote Oil Refining Company is a subsidiary of the International Investment Business Development Group. The IIB consortium is the global business that is involved in financing, project and infrastructure development, funding, asset valuation, monetization, and trade platform projects for humanitarian aid funding and global investment research. Although based in the United States, it is a major global financing and investment conglomerate. The IIB connection is probably responsible for why the Dangote Oil Refining Company cannot drastically reduce the price of PMS in Nigeria. This could also be the reason the NNPCL has been resistant to the DORC or Dangote Refinery, because it probably knows that the company is not wholly an indigenous refining company. Now, another thing is to know that the Dangote Refinery is on a tax-free zone. So let's say, likewise, perhaps many Nigerians are not aware that the Dangote Refinery might not pay any federal or state or local tax in Nigeria. The reason is that the refinery is located in a tax-free zone. To avoid paying any tax, the suit that the Dangote Group brought to the Federal High Court in Abuja included a demand not to pay any tax. It cited and I quote, the provisions of Section 8, Paragraph 1 of the Nigerian Export Processing Zone Act, Sections 23, Paragraph H, and 55, Paragraph 1 of the Companies Income Tax Act, Paragraph 6 of the second schedule to the CIT Act, Regulation 54, Paragraph A of the Dangote Industries Free Zone Regulation 2020, and the Finance Act. The plaintiff, being an entity duly registered as a free zone enterprise, is exempted from all federal, state, and local government taxes, levies, and other rates, and I unquote. So, for a huge company like the Dangote Oil Refinery Company, it will not pay any tax to any level of government in Nigeria. This is IIB Center in Washington D.C. Now, let's look at the IIB subsidiary companies in Nigeria, apart from the Dangote Oil Refining Company. As indicated above, apart from the Dangote Oil Refining Company, the International Investment Business Development Group has 10 other subsidiary companies in Nigeria. You can check online. You have the address there. This means that the Nigerian oil business is technically controlled by an international group and not by Nigeria. Most Nigerians are not aware of this because the subsidiaries of this international finance and investment company has faces of Nigerians at the front of the companies to create the impression that they are totally owned by Nigerians. These are the 10 subsidiaries of the IIB companies in Nigeria. Take your time and go through them. 10 of them, and many of them this in oil business. Conclusion. After carefully examining the ownership of the Dangote Oil Refining Company, it could be said that most of the stock is probably owned by the International Investment Business Development Group that is based in Washington, D.C. It is a worldwide financing and investment consortium. This explains why Mallam Dangote might not be able to lower the price of petrol in remarkable way. The IIB also has 10 other subsidiary companies in Nigeria, which I just showed earlier. The subsidiaries are headed by Nigerians to create the impression that these oil and gas companies are wholly owned by Nigerians. The fact is that most of these Nigerian companies have international shareholders. This contributes to the reason the Nigerian National Petroleum Development Company Limited and other oil and gas related parastatal agencies seem to dance in circles because Nigeria is not in control of the oil industry in Nigeria. In other words, the Nigerian oil industry is dominated by foreign interests, so the price of PMS will continue to fluctuate. Thus, Nigeria is probably the only OPEC country in which the local price of petroleum is being determined through the value of the dollar rather than through the local currency. The reason is that Nigeria is not in control of its oil industry. Finally, it is Mallam Dangote who can say unambiguously whether he is the owner of the Dangote Oil Refining Company or he is a shareholder. Thank you for listening to this presentation. Please subscribe to the channel and listen to other interesting presentations.